My name is BJ Counsel. I view the world through the lens of having been followed by a white clerk as a child while shopping in a five and dime. I'm a retired police executive and own UN50, which gives guidance on surviving interactions with police.
I'm Harmony Chavis, and I view the world through the lens of one of the most misunderstood and diverse generations in our nation's history. I'm a social worker and a believer of radical kindness and love as modalities of healing.
My name is Andrew Counsel. I view the world through the lens of a generational camera phone. I wake up as a black male and go to bed as a black male. I am surviving this never-ending court case we commonly call life in the best way I know how.
All right, welcome back to UN50. We really appreciate you tuning back in. By the time we're actually recording this on the first day of Black History Month, and happy Black History Month. Hope things are going well for everyone. Hope you're safe and you're well. And we've got some guests with us tonight. We've got two professors from North Carolina Central University. Go Eagles. I have on
my NCCU shirt. Do you see this?
UNC. Oh, do you? Okay.
No, cool. NCCU. I'm ripping NCCU today. Yes.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I landed on North Carolina Central, but I didn't go away with a piece of paper. But I definitely went around the yard for a little while. So
probably several times.
Yeah, yeah. Look, probably why I flunked out, because I went around too many times instead of going to classroom. So I have two individuals who are here, and I'll introduce them in a minute. So Harmony, what you been up to?
Well, as I was telling you before this, I'm on a juice cleanse, so I'm not the happiest today. I don't know why I decided to do this. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I think what makes me even more mad is that I paid for it. It's not like I just went out and got like juices. I ordered these juices from LA. Like, who do I think I am? Like ordering pressed juice from LA. This is not even me. So that's how my week is going so far.
So in other words, you're committed because you paid for your juice, right?
I don't know if I'm that committed. I've been thinking about like, in what way could I like use this? So I'm thinking maybe I can just give it away. But I'm I'll make that decision on day 2. This is day 1. So it's the emotion speaking.
All right. So we've got, like I said, two professors or doctors from North Carolina Central University to kind of talk about obviously the movement that we're in from their perspective. And I want to introduce Dr. Russell Robinson, who is communications professor, mass media, pop culture, gender and sexuality. That I'll let him kind of go into details with that when he starts. I'll let him introduce himself. And then Dr. Ralph Barrett, a professor of music at NCCU, doctor of musical arts and retired U.S. Navy. And I can't remember when I first interviewed or talked to them about coming on the show. I think we talked after the insurrection at the Capitol. Was it after that? Do you remember?
I think it was. It was before? Okay.
It was before. Okay. Perfect timing. Okay. Yeah. And the reason I say, because I'm going to zero in on Dr. Barrett on that, because of some statistics that are starting to come out about those individuals who have been arrested. And also, I'm going to start with Dr. Barrett, because when I was looking at your biography, I was reading it, obviously, and then I skipped to the part of your recording credit principles, and they started, and I saw some names on there, and I was just like, my man has played with some folks, Natalie Cole, Burt Bacharach, Dionne Warwick, and I was like, dang. So when I saw that, with all due respect to Dr. Robinson, I said, my man been hanging out with some folks. And so Dr. Barrett, if you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Barrett.
Sure. Well, I've been blessed to be a musician, be able to make my life's work as a musician. As you mentioned, I'm a retired Navy band officer. I spent 28 years in the Navy. While I was in the Navy, I also did a lot of that work that I mentioned in my resume, working a lot, almost as much on the outside as I did on the inside. So I was really blessed to have all of that I was also blessed to have the Navy put me through a master's while I was on active duty, and then be able to use the post 9/11 GI Bill for my doctorate. Wow. And I've had duty stations on the East Coast in DC and Maryland. I was in Hawaii a couple times. In New Orleans. I finished up in Tidewater, Virginia, and I've done quite a bit of travel. I've been married for 41 years next month.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, so I just have a very, very, very blessed life, and this is my 8th year at North Carolina Central, which is a very interesting way to cap off a long work life. But it's been really interesting being there, and
wow.
I enjoy my associations. My first ever association long term with the HBCU. So in many ways, it's kind of coming around that full circle again.
Cool. All right, thank you. So I'm looking forward to talking, especially like I said about the incident. Dr. Robinson.
Yes, ma'am.
My man, what's up?
Let's see, my blood pressure, my No, yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me. I am actually a double eagle. I graduated in 1993 and in 1995. And I guess how I got into getting a PhD in mass communication was because I was a television addict as a kid. Oh. Seriously, my mom and dad, when they split up in the 70s, I discovered cable TV for the first time, and I was glued to the tube. And so I think what wound up happening is that I started watching television to the point where I was able to predict the plot lines. So I remember telling my mom and my stepfather at the time, said, I want to be an actor. And they gave me this look because one was actually a professor at Central. And he said, well, if you want to be an actor, you can do that in New York for free. We will not pay for it. So I went to Central. I worked at the School of Science and Math for a number of years. And then I realized that I just really wanted to move on, study mass comm, study the issues that are not just, and I thought it was strictly just about the notion of what goes on the TV and da-da-da-da-da. No, it was actually about who is in front of the camera and behind the camera, who writes the narrative and who scopes the narrative. Mm-hmm. I've been at Central, like Ralph, I think I'm now on my, I got there in 2010, but I got on my tenure track in 2014. So it's been a wild ride to come back home.
Wow.
It's amazing to be there.
Wow. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on, you both of you, for blessing us with your presence. I really appreciate it. So I think we talked about it at the beginning. So a question I want to ask both of you, that we've lived through 2020, and having lived through 2020, who are you now, Dr. Robinson?
Lord have mercy. Well, I mean, being locked in with a teenage son and a few other things, it really has tested my patience. Mm-hmm. I think I've taken for granted the physical contact that I've had with my colleagues at the facility. Mm-hmm. I've had to learn how to make ways out of no way. I would go to the gym on campus and work it on a regular basis. I'm a power lifter as a hobby. And I realized when I couldn't go to the gym, I was like, what am I going to do? So I had to literally build a powerlifting rack in my house from scrap, and I had it built. But it's really taught me about resilience. It's taught me about mental wellness and how it's important that you keep sanity at all times. Mm. And I'll be honest, I mean, it's reminded me of how the fragility of human life and how it's so precious.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. What about you, Dr. Barrett? Who are you now that you survived 2020?
I'm another year older.
Right.
Unfortunately, no deeper in debt than I was before. The challenge of the year for me was trying to, maintain some level of spiritual and emotional normality when everything else around was in such flux. Trying to protect my health and my wife's health, trying to make sure that the instruction that I was providing was good, trying to keep up with, one of my jobs at North Carolina Central is chair of faculty senate. So there was a lot of shared governance work with, putting all this change together. So there was a lot of that. And I'm different. If I've changed any, it is in my determination and my resolve to, the right thing all the way around. I watched what was going on in Washington, D.C. I sat through a very tense election and saw the aftermath of all of that. And I am determined that whatever I do and however I, perform in life, it is about supporting and doing the right thing. That's what makes the difference. You can complain all day long, and you can fuss, and you can, signify, but you really have to be active in doing the right thing to make sure that society goes the way it needs to go in the future. And that pertains especially to the people that we're responsible for in our higher ed teaching, and our colleagues and our families and all of that.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Doing the right thing. And let's just kind of go ahead and stay with that. I'm still going to come, since you're the military guy, I want to come back because I wanted to ask you about the insurrection at the Capitol, but let's kind of stay with that. When I first talked to you guys, what is it that you guys see and what your role is in helping our students on Black campuses, HBCUs? I mean, Harmony she's protested, and she is a radical person. She's been there, out there, trying to change. And for a millennial, and then for those individuals that are still in college and HBCUs, how do you see your role in, or what's that look like? What's the movement look like on campus? I mean, what either one of you, whoever wants to start that, but what does that look like, and what role do you have in helping them navigate that, on campus, and then when they move on to whatever they're going to be doing as, leaders of this country?
You want to go, Ralph?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I look at it as we are at an opportunity, a crossroads of great opportunity. I look at the fact that we have a lot of millennials and Gen X folk who have supercomputers in their back pocket, and we're looking at how they're using this supercomputer called a phone, and they're able to basically become part of the hashtag revolution, if you will. Black Lives Matter was pivotal, and it was really started on Twitter, and Black Twitter at that. And I look at the fact that my role, especially in my discipline in mass comm, is I want to make sure that first, that we make sure that our students who come to the HBCU understand that it's a whole lot more than just homecoming and Chicken Wednesday. All right.
No, you didn't say Chicken Wednesday.
I certainly did.
Chicken Wednesday is iconic.
It's a whole lot more than that. I think it's about why we are here, and it's about, we have to protect the legacy of what our institutions stand for. And I think in doing that, we have to prepare our students to be able to articulate. And when I say articulate and navigate, we do come from a praxis, or come from a legacy, if you will, of not just suffering, but I would say more so of conquering, of being able to rise to the challenge. I tell my students this all the time. These institutions that we have, we can't take them for granted. We actually have the generation, or have a society or a race of people that start off like a Steven Spielberg movie. We came here on slave ships, and then we had to learn certain languages. So we can't squander the opportunity. And so my role is to make sure that I try to teach them how to communicate effectively. I teach them that it's essential that they participate in various discourses, particularly our political discourse, especially after the last 4 years. So I think that our role is pivotal, essential.
Wow. Yeah. What's up, Dr. Barrett? What do you think?
I think that there's much wisdom in what my colleague says, that we are, at least in my case, I'm 2 generations beyond my students right now. So the way that I try to approach them is with an open mind and a very open heart. I don't understand a lot of what they do. I have a challenge, with their process. I understand that the world that they live in is much more complicated for them than mine might have been for me. But I do know that it really is about a lot of pride in yourself, pride in our heritage, pride in our nation, and confidence in your ability to be able to contribute at a strong level. When I was in the Navy, one of the things I used to say to students that I had there was, you know, from this day forward, you are no longer about yourself. You are about what you do for others. And this is one of the things I try to encourage our students with as well. You know, you've outgrown, you know, me. And now you have to think yourself in terms of, how do I serve the community? How do I serve others? I work with a lot of music education people, and that's all about that. You know, you're no longer thinking about your own instrument or your own horn. You know, you're thinking about how your students are going to need you. So that's a lot of what I try to encourage. You know, think beyond yourself. Think beyond your own interests. Look for that bigger picture, and take great joy in the opportunity that you have to do that. I also, you know, much like Russell does, I teach a lot of self-care because you can't get anywhere unless you're taking care of yourself. You know, I get all over them if they show up and they haven't eaten, or if they say I didn't sleep much, or you know, whatever it is. I always push back at them. You know, you can't be any good to me or anybody else if you're not good to yourself. And it's something that we have to learn. You know, so I'm constantly challenging them to be the mature adult that they want to be. You know, if it's like you dress for for the job you want, not the job you have. And I try to encourage them to be the adult that they want to be now, not wait for that to happen, because it doesn't happen. You know, it's made to happen.
Wow. I'm all that harmony getting, because I'm sure you have something to say, but I find what you just said about having to tell them to do self-care. That's interesting that, I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is, it's interesting that I know as Black culture, we just don't do self-care. We just don't. And the fact that you're telling kids who are on your campus that they need to do that, that continues to say just generational. It's still that we're not taking care of ourselves and don't realize how significant that is for Black folks. And the fact that you're having to tell our young folks to do self-care.
It's not just for the young folks, though.
Wow.
I'm going to tell you, I mean, we're having to tell our faculty, take some care of yourself. You know, I one of the things that I do, or have done, I also was a faculty senate chair, and one of the things I started was a mental wellness initiative for their faculty.
Wow.
And the key is that this thing with COVID, it has hit us so bad that in many cases we don't know that we are going through levels of depression or anxiety. I'll be the first to admit it myself right now. You know, I just had to my psychologist, I call it shrink as a joke, but I just found out that I was going through a slight episode of PTSD, and I had no idea. So I had to pull back and start practicing the self-care that I've been preaching. So I think we have to go ahead and do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Harmon? Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Barrett. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the things that we suffer from as African Americans is the need to suffer much more than we have to. I don't know what this all goes back to. I think it must go back to slavery. It must go back to Reconstruction. It must go all the way back.
Well, what about the Black church too? You can't forget that, because we also talk about spirituality.
Yep. I grew up there too. Yep. So you're not really doing right unless you're suffering at some level. And you know,
I mean, it's not funny, but yeah, you're right.
and I really don't think that's necessary, since our white colleagues don't necessarily feel that way, and they do just fine. So we don't really have to suffer as hard as we think we do in order to be successful. We just need to work hard and work in a structured, smart way, but we don't have to suffer. You know, suffering is optional.
Wow. What you got, Harmon? I know you got something.
So at first when he was talking about like becoming a mature adult. It doesn't just happen. I just got caught up on, I'm like, am I a mature adult? Like, I don't know. Last week I ate cake for like 3 times for breakfast last week. It was rough. But I've been really thinking about this concept, and I don't really identify with it. And I think that in general, we need to move away from it, which is that in order to love ourselves, or in order to be loved by other people, we have to love ourselves first. And I think that this is why community is so important, and why it's important that we have mentors that are successful and established, to really show us how to take care of ourselves and show us how to love ourselves. I think that we take for granted that a lot of people have grown up in environments where they've never really been loved or even illustrated how to take care of themselves. And so that to me is why community is important, right? Is to serve as a model and to emulate this familial structure that a lot of people don't have. So I am constantly moved by the power of community. And I think that it's often overlooked as a component of self-care. Because I'll tell you, on the days where I felt my most unlovable, it wasn't me that pulled myself out of it. It was the people that were determined to continue to love me and to continue to see me in my suffering and refuse to look away. So I definitely appreciate that we do see more professors speaking about it, talking about it, and also, you know, sharing that it's not necessarily all bubble baths and, you know what I mean, pedicures. It's a lot of tough moments. It's a lot of really heavy things. It's a lot of sitting and suffering. And it's a lot of, I think, grieving for me personally. And that's not easy. So self-care isn't just, you know, all of the good things. It's the anxiety, it's the depression, it's the fearfulness, it's being unsure about the future. And I think that that's really, really, really important to highlight whenever we are talking about taking care of ourselves, is really acknowledging the full range of human experience and how necessary and integral we are to one another's healing.
Right. Dr. Robinson, love that. Oh, cool. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I'm going to make a hard left because I want to go to Dr. Barrett with his military background. And like I said, by the time folks hear this, I mean, this is February 1st. We're recording this on, but some data has just come out, referenced the insurrection at the Capitol, and some of the data is coming out that a high percentage of the persons who have been arrested are military.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it's not a shock, obviously, but I, just as a Black military person, been there, done that. What is that? I mean, when you hear that and you see that, you know, what does that say to you as a Black male that was probably rubbing up against someone that probably went into the Capitol? Probably, I don't know. I didn't see any really old people in there, but I'm just kidding. So just, you know, what does that say to you? I mean, what does that say to you in this moment as far as domestic terrorism? And for the most part, you know, the perspective of we're training, we're homegrown, and they're coming out of the military, or they're going in the military and then they're coming out and they're doing, some of them are doing, the extremists are doing some of this stuff. So what's your thought on that? How do you feel as a Black military person? Just had to ask that.
Well, first of all, it breaks my heart, and it angers me to no end. Right. You know, we took this promise. You know, we made this commitment to support and defend the Constitution, and I think we all do. That's the thing that holds us together. You know, is the mission, whatever that may be. But you know, having served that time, what you find is the military really is a microcosm of the nation. So you do see, you know, some very conservative people, but you also see some very, very progressive people as well. And you know, serving in an individual unit, or being in a band or in a class or whatever, you know, I would find that you know, I'd get into these knockdown dragouts with you know, conservative guys, because I'm not very quiet about my opinion, and I never have been, or my politics. You know, you're not supposed to have politics as an active duty person. When I was an officer, I put them away. When I was enlisted, I did not necessarily do that. And I would get into some big discussions with people over conservative versus liberal or progressive politics. And it got really ugly at times. So I knew that they were out there. I did a change of command ceremony for a base commander, my last tour. And this was during the George W. Bush administration, during the Gulf Wars. And he came out at his retirement and said that, that all this, neocon stuff was right. And he was tired of hearing, the bleeding hearts, and, made a big political statement during this ceremony, because he couldn't, he couldn't do it when he was on active duty. So he showed himself as he was going out the door. It was very disconcerting. And I had a couple of people apologize for this. I'll tell you another story that was even more concerning. I had gone to command leadership school in Newport, and it was me as a band officer, and people from other communities. And this one guy he was a diver, and we were having a discussion about something. It was right around the same period of time, and he looked at me and I said, we're all Republicans in here, right? And I looking at it in retrospect, I should have kept my mouth shut, but I couldn't, because I didn't want anyone making an assumption about me. And I said, no, we're not all Republicans in here. And truth be told, we're naval officers, so we don't have politics. Shut him up. And I found myself kind of, wandering away from everybody. But it is very disconcerting to see people who promise to support and defend the Constitution at any level stepping into an insurrectionist situation. It's very sad, and it's very aggravating. And the fact that they fought, and many of them served and bled for the rights of people to vote, and then to turn around and try to take that right away, it's a little confusing. And to me, it's much more about the pushing privilege a little farther than it needs to go. Wow. That was what I saw during the whole thing. It was really a demonstration of privilege. The way they were treated going forward, the way they're being treated now, the way that they were supported, getting in there physically, just allowed to walk out, right. And I keep thinking to myself, man, if this had been, us up in there, it would have been a whole different deal, and that probably aggravated me more than anything else. But it is very sad. In fact, I have a good friend, my best friend, from Pennsylvania. He's a Jewish guy, and his brother or sister-in-law and her husband are, QAnon Trump people, and they were at the insurrection. we were talking about that. I was joking about, because he lives in a real conservative place, and I said, any of your how'd your neighbors do with the insurrection? He said, well, I don't know, but my sister-in-law and her husband were there. Wow. And it was just, so we're so close to these people, and this is really, really pulling us apart. So I hope we find a way to come back together through this.
Yeah, and I definitely feel you on that, how aggravating it is, especially when you got law enforcement officers that were there and going into the space as well.
It's another story altogether.
Yeah, it just kind of makes you,
law enforcement people's a whole other issue.
It just kind of makes you feel bad, just to know that they would break the law. I mean, having a straddle line, you have a right to your political opinion, but once you went in, you breached something, you did something wrong. Dr. Robinson, do you have any opinion of that? Because I got a couple of questions for you.
I don't have the military experience, but I can talk about it just from when I looked at it. And,
right.
We were looking at it, and when I saw Thundar, the organic barbarian, go in there with the horns, I was like, for real, this is happening. And you saw that they had the Confederate flag in there, and then you saw that there were people complicit with doing this. It's weird, because when you go back to this war on terror that they had back in the early 2000s, and they were talking about sleeper cells or sleeper jihadists in America. Well, now you have radicalized Americans who are in their own sleeper cells, and we don't know where they are. And what frightens me is that you have them now in political arenas as well as in law enforcement. Right. So it's kind of like stressing.
Yeah, it is. So, Dr.
Can I say this real quick, BJ?
Yeah, no, yeah, go right ahead.
And thank you so much for your service, Dr. Barrett. And I hope that this comment is not offensive. My dad was also a military veteran in the Vietnam War. And I think that there is something to be said about patriotism and white supremacy and how they intersect. I probably shouldn't say this while we're recording this and upload it, but I'm not proud to be an American. I rarely do I feel good or patriotic, but I think even beyond that, like, patriotism to me represents white supremacy to a certain extent. And I say that because when you think of what America stands for and the very precipice on what this nation was built on, how can we be patriotic and not in some way uphold white supremacy? And I guess that's a whole nother conversation. But when we are talking about this type of stuff, and BJ, you said something like, we're not necessarily surprised, or Dr. Barrett, you said that we know that these type of people exist within these sectors of people. It just reminds me of how much, in my opinion, patriotism really mimics and mirrors white supremacy in a lot of ways.
It does. And if I can, respond a little to that.
Oh, yeah,
please. Patriotism is a hard one because it's been co-opted by the political right, and it's been defined in a certain way. And I've had to deal with that personally. And come up with my understanding of what it means to be a patriot, and what it means in essence. And if you strip it down to its bare essence, it means that you are one who loves your country. That's all it means. One who loves their fatherland, their country. It has no political connection to it. You can be an extremely patriotic liberal. You can be an extremely patriotic socialist, or a conservative. It means you love your country. And we cannot allow the political right to co-opt that and take that away from us. And I've struggled with that. What is it I love about America? Well, I don't love the images. I'm not nuts about I don't worry much about symbols. I'm not one who sees the flag and takes it out of context. It's only a symbol, and symbols come and symbols go, but it's the people, it's the Constitution, it's our neighbors, it's our heritage of positive things, it's Obama, it's family, it's Ellis Island, it's all these things that have helped to, keep us here and put us here, and it's what we do with that. If you don't love the country, then maybe you're looking to love the wrong thing. Because I love America, but I love Americans first. And I love what we stand for, and I love the possibilities. The possibilities are tremendous. So that's where I come from on this, and I try not to be angry with those who have co-opted it to mean something else or put loyalty tests behind it. But, now I just ignore them.
Yeah. It's so hard. They're so loud, and they're everywhere. They are literally everywhere. And then for you, Dr. Robinson, in mass comm, I guess, what are some big themes that you've seen? I'm sure we all can identify some as far as skin color, but even in the reporting, would you say that there's been a really big difference in how this domestic terrorist attack was presented versus things like Black Lives Matter? And specifically, I would say the protests dealing with Breonna Taylor. I think
Absolutely. Yeah, I will tell you, and again, not to be flippant about it, but Ray Charles, who's dead and blind, can see that there was disparate coverage. If you take a look at the fact that this whole piece, the reporters, we're surprised. We're so surprised, blah, 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 blah. And then you see the images. They're just all in total shock and awe that they're looking at. white rage, right? They're in shock and awe, and they're recovering this. But then when they look at the Breonna Taylors, when they look at the protests and and what happened with George Floyd and others, and you see how that's reported, then we go back to then using canon language, we're using words that are the N-word by proxy, thugs, and all that. Soledad O'Brien said that so eloquently some time ago. So I think that we have biased reporting. I think that's why it's important that we also have folks, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z, and millennials, who are now able to use this technology. I'm not promoting Apple, but who's able to use their smartphones. And now they have the opportunity to tell the story on their own, because our media system, whether we choose to believe or not, it is a business. And now that we have so many outlets, you can now turn the channel to subscribe to the political ideology you want to, as opposed to back in the day when you had folk who believed that's the way it is, Walter Cronkite, or
that's folks me. There you go. That's me.
And you could trust folks to really be objective. Right now, anyone can be a journalist, and I think this issue of disinformation, we cannot not talk about that, because how it's been covered and how you have anyone who's able to put this stuff out there. I think we're now going to be looking at a psychological tsunami of folks who have to be, I hate to use the word, deprogrammed, because they drank the Trump Kool-Aid like Jim Jones and not the rapper. And so because of that, we saw this one person who's like, oh, Donald Trump, please save us. And I'm like, no. This is what you bought into because you were not critical in what you consume with your media. And that's what happened, I think.
And then the biggest thing that I'm noticing is when we talk about protests with Black people, we use the word riot. And even BJ, when we've been doing this, we've been using the word insurrection. And when you think of the connotation that goes with riot versus insurrection, to me, insurrection sounds a lot more noble and a lot more sophisticated. And
it's
romanticized. These are some thugs. These are domestic terrorists. And I think that to be intentional about the language that we're using, every time that we reference this, we need to call it a terrorist attack on the Capitol, because that's what it is. And even though, we're not intentionally giving these people a way out, we are, because we're not holding them accountable. Insurrection is not what this was. This was a deliberate terrorist attack that was multidimensional. And I think that to me is what makes it so scary. It was on so many different levels. It wasn't just community members coming to the Capitol. It was also police officers that were letting them in. It was also leadership that was not, I would say, direct and as intentional as they could have been or should have been.
That's fair. I'll even add. I was going to say, Harmony, I'll even add to that too, because I think we go back and we can compare the domestic terrorist attack of 9/11. There was then an all-out media assault on brown people, and I mean Arabic Islamic people, as opposed to now, the terrorists look like Ma and Pa Kettle. They look like Captain Kirk, but you don't want to say that. But they were white people who took over, who stormed a building. Now, I can tell you, if Black people had done that, well, when there was the protest, and I think we all know that, when there was the protest back in DC, you saw, it was a weapons demo. You saw people who were in full military regalia. Imagine if Black folks did that, there would be a body count. So no.
It would have been a massacre. It would have been a massacre. When Freddie Gray was killed back in 2014, me and my dad went to a protest at the old police headquarters in downtown Durham. Keep in mind, my dad at the time was, late 60s. He walked with a cane, and we were walking through the parking lot. And there were police in full riot gear. And I remember them saying, "Are you going to the protest?" And when we said yes, they were like, "Well, you can't walk in this parking lot." So they made us walk literally all the way around. They see my dad has a cane, so I don't know, what he really do with that. But I remember before we started the protest, they said, essentially, this can be dangerous. We need for everybody to follow directions and to, stay out of the street as much as possible so we don't have folks being arrested. And the entire time we were being followed by police in full riot gear. Now, these are, Durham is a city of 250,000 approximately. This is the capital. like, how did this even happen? And I mean, I definitely understand Trump obviously had a whole lot to do with it, but I think even beyond that, it's this complacency to his chaos. I mean, complete complacency to his chaos. And like you were saying, there are so many people that are going to have to be deprogrammed, because I started reading more of this Trump media because I was concerned, but I was also kind of interested, because I knew a lot of people who I thought were smart that were acting really, really stupid after they read, you know, this propaganda essentially. And so I started reading some of it. And in a lot of ways, I can understand how these people could be radicalized so easily, and how as a country, we have really turned patriotism, like you were saying, Dr. Barrett, into some type of weaponized, politicized type of force. And I don't know, I'm interested to see how the kids that are in college now and that are in high school now, how their activism is going to be changed and informed by not only the Trump presidency, but this pandemic that's now been almost a year long.
Yeah, I think that we, I will challenge one statement. Sure. I thought about what that event was and the best term to use for it. And an insurrection is the term, because that implies the violent attempt to violently take over a government or a system. And that's what that was. You know, they went there with the intention of stopping that electoral college vote. That was their intention. And, you know, to do it by any means necessary, obviously. You know, they brought handcuffs and firearms and, you know, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So based on that, I use that term, and I don't use it to romanticize it, because I can't think of a better term, you know, than an insurrection. There was intent there. I think that we missed something, and we talked about it a lot this past year, and that is that when we get out and vote, things happen. And we saw that in this last election. We just saw it in Georgia. You know, who would have thought that there'd be 2 Democrats coming out of Georgia, a black guy and a Jew, you know, and
what a combo.
What happened. But this is what happened when people get it. And, you know, it still didn't represent the full power of the African-American vote in Georgia. It's still, because there were still people that didn't come out. If we voted in bigger numbers, you know, everything would change. Everything would change. Yeah. So I think we give away our power by not doing that.
Yes.
You know, and these people that showed up for the insurrection part, they don't. They value their franchise, and they use that power. It's just not that many of them, and we allow them to do that. So we abrogate, you know, our ability to do things by not voting. Right. You know, I have students that don't vote.
Yeah, I find that in millennials specifically, they are incredibly critical of our electoral process, and really just in the system, like capitalism in general. I personally do not identify as a capitalist. I would say I'm more of a democratic socialist. But I do vote, but I think that there is such a, I don't know, just like this disbelief in the electoral process with millennials like myself, that it's even hard for me to really get across to them that they should vote. I would say most of the people I associate with closely were social workers, so we all vote. But I've seen people on social media where, you know, people are presenting very valid facts and arguments to kind of present the other side, and they are so resistant. And I know that has a big part of why the change is not as transformative as we would like it to be. I mean, Trump was 74 and Biden is 71 years old. Like these
78, I think.
78. Biden is 78.
He's the oldest one to be elected.
Yeah, he's older. Yeah, he's older than Trump.
I thought he was fine, but now I think he's extra fine if he's 78. 78.
Yeah, she got a thing for old man, Dr. Barrett. You better be glad you married.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, and you know, one of the things I appreciate you talking about that. The voting. You still have people who are complacent, but I'm kind of hoping that what was proven in Georgia is that if Black folks vote, things happen. So I'm hoping that was an exercise in, see, See what can happen. So I'm kind of hoping that is that. Well, I got a couple of questions I want to ask because kind of talk about Popo stuff real quick. And it has to do with masculinity, Dr. Robinson.
Lord help me.
And this came from another thing that I was sitting in on. The conversation was Black male being arrested, and he's by himself and he's compliant. He is with his friends and he is not compliant because he possibly it's like, you can take everything away from me, but you're not going to take away my dignity. And so this particular gentleman is a South Carolina professor, basically done a little bit of study about that, about if they're with their friends, it's like, I got to show you. But if I'm not with my friends, okay. So I just want to get your perspective on that, since you kind of do a study on gender and masculinity, especially as it relates to, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get Black bodies home safe.
Absolutely.
And I really don't even need you to rail up even in front of your boys and your girls, but I understand that that's a thing. And I just want to get your insight on that, maybe.
I mean, it's macho politics at best. If you're by yourself, yes, I'm going to comply because I'm just going to comply. But around your boys, you're like, I ain't gonna be no punk. And so because you don't want to be no punk, you're gonna try to show up and show out. And then unfortunately, then you're gonna get the other treatment and you might become a hashtag. Right. And so the thing is that we have to have this hard, serious negotiation. I think that we have to talk about strength and look at strength in a different way. See, and that's one of the things that I believe that we as African-American men, Black men, we need to redefine. And that cool pose is going to get us killed if we're not careful with it. And so the idea is that we have to redefine what strength is. For example, I remember when I became a full-time custodial single dad of my son, I had people like, man, it's okay to nurture a child. That is what we're supposed to do. And that's a sign of strength. Right. But unfortunately, we have this patriarchal hegemonic idea of what strength is. And so part of that, we're like, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to advocate for myself. True, we understand that, but there are ways to go about that. On the street, and I think I've said this before, on the street, in the dark of the night, the person who has the power, if you're in a traffic stop, is the individual who has the badge and the gun. Your job is to get home. Now, if you would like to, quote, man up, do so with an attorney after the fact. Live to tell the tale. So I think we're looking at this notion where we have to have these conversations, transformative conversations, redefining what strength is. Strength does not have to be wiling out. Strength actually means self-control. Strength means knowing the time and the place. And I do believe that we're beginning to have those conversations. I try to have that conversation with my students. But again, unfortunately, because they're around their people, I'm not going to be no punk, so I'm fine. And all of a sudden, the whole car goes down. It doesn't need to be that way.
Right. All right. Dr. Barrett, you got any comment on that?
I must agree with my colleague. It is baked into young adult male. And I think more so with that young men of color. You don't ever want to be perceived as being a punk, and you can be a certain way when you're outside of the circle, when you're home with mom, when you're with your girlfriend, when you're in church, there's certainly certain socially acceptable places where it's okay to be, mature and responsible. But when you're with the boys, it's not one of them. And I see that with young men, and I'm ashamed to see, I see that with men of my age. Wow. That's very sad. You shouldn't be 60 years old and carrying that kind of phony machismo around, because it doesn't serve anything. Right. It doesn't serve anything at all. And I think it's irresponsible. It sets bad example, and it takes no courage to stand up like that. They consider it, young men will consider that courage, but they don't know the difference between courage and bravado, and that's just bravado. That's just hormonal expression. But real maturity, real courage is to stand up, like I said before, for the right thing, and stand up in dignity. I will share this. I spent a lot of my life and all of my academic time and most of my military time too in an environment that was primarily non-Black. So everything I did, I was repping for the community, and I didn't like it, but I knew that much as I said I only speak for myself, that's not how many people were taking it. So I needed to be reasonable, rational, mature, responsible, all those positive things, because the minute I stepped over the line and did the wrong thing, see what I tell you, they're all like,
right.
I felt the pressure,
right.
But it did help to keep me, keep me straight. And it almost doesn't seem to matter, anymore, because it's a different generation, and I think young men see things a different way, and we do need to encourage them more to just be about doing the right thing all the time.
I'd like to say this, BJ. Sorry, doctor.
No, go ahead, please.
I thought BJ was about to cut me off, so I was like, skirt, let me get in here real quick.
She knows me.
I also like to think of masculinity as this type of shield, right? Like kind of how I think about anger. It's a mask for fear and for sadness. And I think the larger conversation needs to be about emotional regulation and showing people what this means. I think far too many people have no idea how to regulate their emotions. So really, the only response they do know to have is to wild out, like you said. They don't have any other context. They don't have any other, I would say, like guidance. And especially in the Black community, I feel like there was a long time where the male was removed from the home. And I think because of that, there are these outdated, and I would even say archaic ideas of what it means to be a man. And I think that a lot of times, for me anyway, this hypermasculinity is almost barbaric. And I guess my thing is, where do we start to have these conversations? Because we can't start in a college classroom, unfortunately, and expect these kids to be able to make these tangible changes, because they don't know. You've gone 18, 19, 20 years living your life with the understanding that when something doesn't go your way, you're angry about it, you're upset about it, you have to preserve this persona. And that's just, I don't think is conducive to a happy, healthy, fulfilled life for the person specifically, because that's a lot to have to carry around, to be strong all the time, to be correct all the time, to be a protector, to always be ready to go. To me, that sounds like a chronic fight or flight response, where the response is always to fight. And that's exhausting for anybody. I mean, even for the body, that's exhausting.
I think you keep it in context, and I think you do what's appropriate for the for the place where you are, and the point in life where you are. How do we share that? How do we work that? Well, it's best to start when a person is young, but it's never too late to learn the right way to go. North Carolina Central University has a men's program that's a really, really good program, and it works with that premise. If you take a young adult, older adolescent male, and take him out of the co-education context and put him in a place where he's only dealing with other men in his peer group and older men who have been through the experience and set the standard, and then you give them younger men to work with, boys that they can help mentor. I mean, that's an ideal situation, and we've seen so many young men come through that situation where they were, flaking out to start, and they end up being better academically. They've changed kind of their career trajectory, and you know, they've made a difference. So programs like that are very, very helpful. They keep young men out of jail. Yeah. You know, they enforce the idea that, you know, law enforcement is not necessarily there to mess with you. And, you know, the best way to avoid that situation is to stay home at night, you know, things like that. All those things that, you know, we just kind of consider common sense. And those programs are very effective and they work really well.
Is that Dr. Harvey?
He used to do that. He used to do that. He's now moved on to another place.
Okay, yeah, because I know Dr. Harvey. I remember when that started. So what you got, Dr. Robinson?
I was going to add this, and I know that your time is running out, so I'll try to
good? Go ahead.
You sure? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. So no, because I didn't want to be like. But no, I think the other thing that we have to have a conversation too about is this notion also of toxic masculinity. We have not begun to broach the topic, I think, seriously enough. If we think about the notion, first of all, of heteronormative masculinity and how that has a patriarchal root within white men, then unfortunately, when you begin to look at that conversation, then we're trying to aspire to something that really puts us at a lower tier. And so because you have this competition, if you will, we try to aspire to this notion of we want to be, you know, the patriarchal breadwinner. We have to do this and match ourselves toe to toe with what the hegemonic construct is. However, we have yet to even really talk about masculinity within our queer circles as well. Unfortunately, when we don't have that conversation, that leaves a lot of folk out, because then at the same time, whatever your sexual preference would be, or whatever it's biologically determined to be, we still have to have that space too. And so we have not really, I think, done a service to our queer brothers when we have this conversation. So we have to begin to talk about masculinity and what does it mean, and the notion of how we compare that to, you know, does it mean that you have to do a certain thing and then you're looked at a different way, as opposed to embracing that. So I think we have to begin to have those conversations as well.
And the media and pop culture and how we consume it. I mean, it tells you that this is who you're supposed to be. Yeah. This is what you're supposed to look like. This is what you're supposed to function like. I know this girl, and basically she had posted this video of her son to I feel like I sound like such a whack person, some rapper. I listen to rap. So if you're listening to this, don't come for me. I listen to rap. I listen to trap music. But the little baby was, you know what I mean? It was very provocative, and it was a lot of, vulgar language, and he was even like emulating what they were doing in the rap video, like grabbing at his pants, moving his shirt around, almost like he was like pulling a gun. And I know this kid is no more than 2 or 3 years old, and that's what really, really worries me. It's like you are being taught that this is exactly who you're supposed to be. This is who you're supposed to aspire to be. And like we were talking about before, this is why community is important, and these programs like at NCCU are so integral to people being able to kind of break this generational curse and realize I don't have to carry it all, first and foremost. And second of all, that masculinity does not equal safety. And I think that that's what a lot of men are looking for, is some sense of safety and self-assurance that's not going to come from behaving like a masculine person.
Right. The other thing too, I would add, and I'll be quiet then because I know you probably have a hard break. And please forgive my dogs. But,
you're fine. You're fine. But, we're all animal lovers here. We're good.
But no, I think we also, because you've made me really think about this thing, and we have to break the cycle of psychological trauma and abuse within our families and communities. This is one thing that is going to sound, okay, so I'm a 70s baby. So I can tell you the story about one of the worst whippings I ever got, and that was after my father saw the miniseries Roots. So the reality is that I don't know, I mean, I don't know if I deserved it, but the idea is that we have to stop thinking about physical abuse as a way of disciplining and raising our children, particularly our Black men. And so I have made a very hard decision, actually an easy decision. After I tried to give my son his first whooping at around 8, I said, this will never happen again. And the reason I did it, because I watched the film 12 Years of a Slave. And I saw how the character got beaten like that. And I was like, oh my God, because my son was like, I don't want that. Right. So we have to begin to have conversations that we begin to break the cycles of abuse too.
I think corporal punishment is what we do when we don't use our imagination, think up other things.
That's beautiful. You should put that on a shirt. Seriously, like I think that's so profound.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead, market it, Ralph. We need the money.
Yeah, market it. I'm telling you. Put it on a t-shirt.
It was here first.
When I was preparing to teach in the public schools back in the late 70s, I was working in a middle school, and for my practicum, one of the schools, and this school district is in central Pennsylvania, and they had just reestablished paddling as discipline. And the band director at this middle school, who was a good guy, I was a trombone player. I used to work jobs with him and stuff.
Right.
And he had an African American young woman, very smart, very very physically and psychologically, I guess, mature for her age. I think she was in a home situation where she was just allowed to be older than she was. And she kind of a smart mouth, which middle schoolers are going to have,
Yeah.
And she said something that he didn't like, and he had to paddle her. And he said, "Would you come in and witness this?" And I said, "If you tell me I have to." He said, "Well, that's part of your your practicum thing." And it was in a closed off room, and I watched this white man beat this black child, and I'm still kind of traumatized about it. And I went and talked to the principal of the school about it. I went and talked to my student teaching supervisor. I talked to my father. I mean, I felt terrible about this for a long time. That, there were so many things that this child could respond to. There were so many other ways that he could have dealt with this. And by doing this, he showed that he had no more patience for her. He had no imagination to work with her. He didn't care enough about her to stretch it a little bit. And I never saw him paddle anybody else, black, white, or otherwise. So, I don't know what that means, but because she wasn't the worst student in that place. But he just showed he didn't know how to handle, an adolescent black child. And I remember that. So, when I was raising my daughter, I never, I had no reason to. If I couldn't handle her without corporal punishment, then I need to go back and rethink what I was doing.
Right.
I had plenty of corporal punishment growing up, and I didn't need any of it. I was not a bad kid.
I wish I didn't get a beaten over spelling test, but it happened.
It doesn't do anything other than show you that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
So and still in this day and age, we have students. I taught students that I talked to that got paddled and beat regularly.
Yeah.
And they talk about, well, I'm going to do that to my children. I said, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. You will get papers on you now.
CPS, I'm a mandatory reporter.
I heard people say, it didn't hurt me, so, it helped me, so it's going to help my children.
Yeah.
And that was what my parents said, and they were wrong.
Yeah.
They were, I love my mom and dad, but they were absolutely wrong. They never had to spank me. Wow. They never had to spank me. And they only did it because they didn't know what else to do.
Right.
They would have had me just by their disapproval.
Yeah.
There were all kinds of things they could have done. And then it got to the point where, it didn't really hurt as much as it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And, it drove fear, and it shouldn't drive love. Right, so, these are things that are important. We make people go through a tremendous process in order to drive a car. You have to have a license and a degree to teach school. There's licenses for all sorts of things, but there is no compulsory training for parenting.
Right. That's right.
And anybody that can reproduce can be a parent. And it's
that
not.
Is unfortunate.
Well,
I am sorry. That is so unfortunate.
It's cold but true.
Yeah, it is. And that's a lot of the problems that we have. I think is people make babies, but babies are only babies for what, a couple hours, and then they start walking around and talking. They're in school and
hours. Ralph, I don't know about that.
and they're small adults, and also, they don't stay little for very long.
Right.
And the idea now in culture, and I'm digressing a little bit, that young people, well, grown adults will use the expression, well, we want to start a family for having a baby before they get married. I guess I'm just old school like that, but I don't think that's a practical and a meaningful thing to do. I think children come out of a committed, meaningful relationship that is bringing a child into it out of that, out of the need and out of the desire to do something with that child, not because babies is cute or not because, you give yourself some sort of credit, some sort of family cred by having a child. You want to be a family, commit, marry, live, put your money together and,
That's some work, man.
You gotta work out. Making a baby is the easiest thing in the world. Raising a baby is the hardest.
Yeah, it is. Wow, we went there, didn't we? We went there.
We're sorry.
Oh no, we're good. This is a good conversation. I really appreciate it. So I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate the very diverse kind of conversations that we've had across the board, and we may have to, some of this conversation probably needs to have another chat. You know
how to find us.
Yeah, I know how to find you guys. Yeah. Y'all ain't doing nothing at night.
Well, okay.
Speak for yourself, BJ.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm the retired one. Yeah, I get it. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us and your input. And also, like I said, I keep referring to when the three of us spoke earlier for me to ask you guys to come on board, and you offered if you could be of assistance, and I may end up taking you up on that and with some guidance and some input as to how I move, toward some other ideas I have, but you and 5-0, but I really appreciate you guys. So thank you very much, Dr. Robinson and Dr. Barrett.
My pleasure.
Sharing your wisdom and the work that you're doing for HBCU students, for all future leaders, North Carolina Central University. So thank you. I really do. Harmony, do you have anything to say before we call it an evening?
Just gonna echo those same sentiments, and happy Black History Month. I say all the time, Black joy is an act of resistance. So I hope that we can all find a way to be joyful today and for the rest of this month.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. So folks, we really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that we've had today with Dr. Robinson and Dr. Barrett from North Carolina Central University. And as always, stay well, stay safe, and peace.